I seriously think that the thing that is standing between your way of making a lot of money and where you are right now is how much you're able to be in flow state. I am so confident in that answer. It's probably the thing that I am most confident in saying and everything I learned in business for all my life. And to further prove this point, Warren Buffett and Bill Gates both said, without knowing what the other person said, that the number one most important part on how to make wealth is focus. Now, focus is how you get into flow state. And I started reading about flow state because of Dan Coe. Dan Coe is a YouTuber, and he the thing that he preaches the most is the idea that you should work on something for 2 hours a day, and within like I don't know what his time period is. I think he says like 2 years or something, your life will be changed. Is basically his promise, his offer to you by following his advice. And I read his book Art of Focus because of I saw a video by Sam Ovens when Sam Ovens talked about this Bill Gates and Warren Buffett quote, which I mentioned before. And I realized that there might be something to this focus. And I was in a part of my life where I wanted to read a lot of books, so I went to Amazon and I searched for book in focus. And The Art of Focus by Dan Coe was a book that kind of landed like up high. And I think that he has kind of he made the book for that sole reason, I think, because he knows that people will find out sooner or later that focus is the answer to make money online, basically. And I read the book, and in the ending of that book, he recommends authors. And one of my favorite people is Isaac Newton, and the most famous quote by Isaac Newton is, "If I have seen further, it is because I have been standing on the shoulders of giants." And the giants that Dan Coe has been standing on is the authors in the ending of the book. And one of the authors that he talks about a lot is Stephen Kotler. Now, I actually found out about Stephen Kotler by Rian Doris. Rian Doris bought Sam Ovens businessconsulting.com. And I found out about Rian Doris has a YouTube channel when he talks about flow state. And in his videos, he mentions Stephen Kotler. And therefore, it was the first time I was introduced to Stephen Kotler. And Stephen Kotler, I would say, is the best person about flow state today. I think he is probably the person who's most invested in the concept of flow state. And I've read, I think, 3 books by Stephen Kotler. And I have been in flow state without realizing it. But the first time when I entered flow state, when I realized it, it was intentional, and it was something I was searching for. Was like a month ago. No, this might have been 2 months ago, where I focused heavily on doing outreach for 3.5 hours. And then I ended in flow state. And it's something you have to experience to understand. So I'm not even going to try to explain how it feels like to be in flow state. Read about Stephen Kotler, and the time aspect of life disappears. The whole world disappears. It's just you and the task that you're doing. Your physical body is an out of body experience. You feel like you're not even in control of your hands, or you're in control of your hands anymore, but you don't feel like it. And I have been, why I'm making this video today is because I am slowly getting into flow state. Now I'm actually disrupting the flow state, but I think I've been working for like an hour now. I can actually check for how long I worked doing only one thing, which is outreach. Yes, no, it's not even an hour. It's like 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes of doing one task. And the thing I want, the idea which I probably should have started this video with is, I believe that the biggest reason why you are not in flow state is because of your thoughts. Basically, internal distractions is what Stephen Kotler calls this. It's the internal thoughts about which are usually fears and worries. And so I'm working now, and I'm trying to get into flow state. Now, keep in mind, I think I have a above average presence. Basically, I think I don't know which percentile I would put myself in. Maybe 80th percentile. It might even be 90th percentile. Might even be 90. Like, it's probably higher than I recognize it is, of how much I focus during my days. And what does focus basically mean? Focus means you do one thing. Now, this could be anything, right? This could be playing football, playing basketball, swimming. It could be puzzle. It could be writing. I know that Dan Coe talks a lot about writing. It could be talking to someone. Like, there's so many things that you could enter flow state within. And how to get there is like, if you are having a conversation with someone, you focus solely on the conversation and you don't get distracted by the thoughts in your head. Now, you might get like a great insight into what you want to say, but usually that's another thought. I call that the small inner, or the silent inner voice, or the small inner voice. I don't exactly know what I remember what I call it. I think it's a small inner voice. It's very different from the thoughts of like fears and worries. It's just like, it's basically like your subconscious pops up a really, really good thing to say. So I genuinely think that the biggest challenge people have in entering flow state, which is also my claim is also, I think flow state is that there's nothing that is more important and that is more impactful as being in flow state into making you rich. And if you don't believe me, believe people like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, right? And there's so many like layers to this. I would say that the reason why I think Einstein changed the world with his relativity theory is because of him thinking about something for a sustained period of time. Now, what he was doing in flow state was he was thinking about something. And you have like the observer, or no, I don't know how should I explain this. You have the thinking you can control, so you can decide. I want to think about strawberries. You decide you think about strawberries, and then you have the other thinking, which is like you get fears and worries, and this is also once again different. And Isaac Newton, I think, is the better. I like Isaac Newton a lot more than I like Einstein. And Isaac Newton is basically the most genius man, except for Jesus, who ever lived. And within science, basically, is maybe better like. And what he did was spent a lot of time thinking. So his flow state was thinking, which is something I think is very interesting. I think Oppenheimer is also in that category. So that's one part of like being in flow state. Yeah, like you're constantly thinking about the solution to a problem. And I think that we're not going to touch upon that in this video, but I think that is also very interesting in like you focus on thinking. I think that is like I think that I don't know how to put it. I just think that is like when you start inventing stuff, like Steve Jobs. I think that's when you really start to do something that has never been done before. That's when you invent stuff. And I think the innovation is a very, very interesting topic. And not only in terms of like inventing technology or laws, physical laws. I'm talking about inventing like art, creative, movies, music. But we're not going to touch upon that in this video. We're going to touch upon more in general flow state. And I think that the one thing that it could make you rich, is my claim, is your ability to be in flow state. So basically, it's a very simple formula, right? Flow state equals, if you focus on the highest leverage work. So once again, it's about what do you focus on, because you can focus on like cleaning your apartment and do that in a flow state, right? But I'm talking about the highest leverage work you can do and focus on. And what do I mean by leverage? And by leverage, I mean the action you can take that gives you the biggest yield, the biggest result, the biggest outcome. So I do one action and I get a very big reaction. So it could be I send, and in terms of making money online, I think by far the most important, the highest leverage action you can do is outreach. You send outreach to new prospects. That has incredibly high leverage. I can send one outreach that makes me a millionaire because I land the perfect customer, right? It's a very low probability and it's like 0.000 whatever percent. But let's say it's after 10,000 emails, 10,000 outreach, and I get one customer which is perfect for my business, and we make millions of dollars. Then the action that made me millions of dollars started with me sending an outreach. Okay? And your ability to be, so the action in this case is just doing outreach. I think that is the most leverage activity you can do. And then you could argue with me and say that, no, it's sales calls. Yes, that is actually a higher leverage activity you can do. So you hire people who do your outreach, and then you do the sales calls, and then after that you deliver. So after the you have like filled your full calendar, and you have a team that fills your calendar with meetings, and then you have more meetings than you can handle. You start hiring people that take your sales calls, and until you are able to focus solely on the product. That is the highest leverage. So you take a look at people like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. These were people who focused on the product. I think Elon Musk said that if you have a great product, you don't need to do sales. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. So the highest leverage action you can actually do is focusing on making the product that you're selling the best product on the market. And not only that, because when you have the best product on the market, you're going to enter into something called innovator's dilemma. When things are good, that's when you really have to start innovating more, which is what Apple did. If Apple had Apple II, and it sold a lot, it sold like super, it made the business $1 billion business, I think, and it made Steve Jobs $100+ millionaire, $100 million plus net worth, because of one product, Apple II, which was a computer. Now Apple could have kept on just selling their product, which is what Apple wanted to do. But Steve Jobs wanted to invent the better computer, which I think was Lisa. I'm not sure. It might have been the Macintosh. I don't remember exactly. But he wanted to invent something better. And there's a lot of stories about this. You take Caesar, for example. No, I don't know. I think Caesar is a good example of this. He didn't have competition, basically. So he had all the power. And without competition, he started. I don't know if Caesar is the good example of this. I might be switching up with somebody else. But when there was, let's say it was Caesar, he had no competition. So basically, he stopped innovating, if we're going to keep using that term. And then he was actually killed. I'm honestly not the right person to talk about this, because I just remember that there were one big person who didn't have competitors, and he got comfortable, and then there actually come competitors because he was comfortable and beat him. So he kind of lost the game of business, which is like a business 101, right? If you have a good product and you don't keep innovating it, you are going to lose to competitors. It's a matter of time, which is like why Netflix continue to invent stuff. Now I'm actually getting a little bit off topic here, so let's just stop there. Anyway, so the highest leverage thing you can actually do is innovating. That's the kind of the final point I want to get to, which is what made Apple the biggest company of all time at a certain point, because of innovation. I think Nvidia is the biggest company of all time now because they are innovating. So innovation is actually the highest leverage work you can do, which is why I mentioned before Isaac Newton, Einstein, and Oppenheimer, because these are people who have innovated. They created stuff that had been created before. They're a better example of this, the brothers who made the first airplane, the people who climbed Mount Everest. They're better example of this, but innovating, and I think it's the highest leverage work, and especially, and I think it's the innovation that speaks to me is making movies, which is creative. It's like art, right? But so now we've kind of talked a lot about things. Like the thing that is holding you back from making money is flow state. Now there are going to be different phases. So you do focus on outreach one phase, another phase you focus on sales calls, another phase you focus on service delivery, and another phase you focus on innovation. Okay, and it's really about what is the highest leverage action I can do right now, and being flow state. And then you might ask, okay, how long, right? And I already told you about this. When your calendar is filled, you start hiring people who do the outreach. When your calendar is more than filled, then you start hiring people who take your sales calls. And then slowly you can start focusing on service delivery when you have a team that handles your sales calls. And then when you have a team that actually handles your service delivery and have a team that makes your service delivery better, you can start to focus on innovation, right? And then you can start to focus on a group of people who focus on innovation, right? Just because people is leverage, and people are leverage. Okay, but so basically we've come to the conclusion that being in flow state is the thing that is going to make you rich. And I realized this like a month ago. No, it might have been 2 months ago. With the first time I realized how much effort I can get. I mean, how much work I can do when I'm in flow state. Now, what is so the answer is the secret basically to making money is flow state, right? But then the question is how many people are in flow state? And I think that right now the amount of the percentage of the population that are in flow state, I think, is lower than ever. Now that might sound weird, and I can't fact check that. But why I think this is because distractions has never been so present as they are right now, and the phone is like the reason for that. So like 20 years ago, I think that people were so much more in flow state, and I actually, a part of me wanted to live in that world. You know, the phones were really present. I mean, you had your phones, but they weren't like, you didn't have social media and stuff. That's kind of the world where I crave. I'm not gonna say that because there's so many possibilities today, right? But so the ability to be in flow state, I think, is really, really. I mean, the amount of the percentage of the population who's in flow state, I think, is very, very low, and I think it's getting lower every day because of distractions. Now, there are endless amounts of distractions. The phone is not the only one. It could be women. It could be travel. It could be just comfort. It could be discomfort. But that's usually vehicle for you, or a place where you actually start focus. So I think comfort is better. It's just better focus on comfort. There are many distractions, right? And I think that some of us talked about in his video about, Netflix, video games, having a beer with your friends, all these things. But I would say that I don't really care about those distractions as much as I think that the number one distraction. That's why I like to get to the core. I really like to get to the core of things because there's so many ways to talk about flow state, leverage, and all these things. And there's just too much clatter. It's good to have all this knowledge, understand each thing. But I think it's, once again, focus. You focus on one thing. So I focus on flow state, I focus on outreach, and then I focus on what is the biggest distraction, which is internal distractions, which is your thoughts. Now, your thoughts could be like, I have to check my phone. I have to, I'm afraid something will happen. I'm worried about something. And the thoughts that I'm having, these 40 minutes of which I worked, it's like crazy fearful thoughts, crazy worry thoughts, like which are very irrational, and they're just like, they're crazy. Like it's just like I'm thinking, like, what is happening? And I think that I will also claim that the biggest challenge into getting into flow state that will make you rich is fears and worries. Thoughts, basically. So for example, maybe someone has texted me And it's not only, I think on a deeper level, it's like I'm afraid that this thing will happen, right? Um, and therefore I escape that fear with I take out my phone and I start scrolling through TikTok and I start scrolling through Instagram to escape the fear. I think that is even what is happening the most of the time. So you're afraid of something, you worry about something, and you want to escape that. So you stop the work and you do something else. So it's like, and I know that one book really talks about this a lot, and I think it's called The War of Art. I'm actually going to double check that. This is, yes, The War of Art. Now, I read this book by Stephen Pressfield, and I wasn't really like mind blown by it. I was like, I remember reading the book and I was like, I didn't really like anything about the book because I already knew what he was talking about, which is paradigm. So when I start to work and be in flow state and I do the highest leverage work, basically I'm gonna become rich. That's basically what I'm saying. That's my claim. And that is basically me compared to me now, right? I'm gonna become a new identity. I'm gonna become a new character because I'm gonna have a different income. So I'm gonna enter a new paradigm. So I think that the best person in the world about paradigm was Bob Proctor. I love Bob Proctor, and I think he is. I wish I could have met him. He passed away, I think, in 2021 before I read his book. Or it might have been 2022. Anyway, I wish I'd met him because I think that he was the guy who was the best at paradigm change. Now, there's probably going to be new people now that are better at paradigm change. I'm actually gonna go to ChatGPT and I'm gonna search which authors are the best. No, which people are the best people in the world at paradigm change. Okay, so of course, the number one person is Jesus. And I to kind of further to make it more clear, I mean personal paradigm change. And according to ChatGPT, Jesus number one, Carl Jung is number two, and then Viktor Frankl, then Earl Nightingale, then Bob Proctor, then Stephen Covey, then Wayne Dyer, then Napoleon Hill, then Tony Robbins, then James Allen. Like, who knows who's right here, right? It's difficult. I agree with one person, and that's number one, Jesus. But the rest of them, I'm not sure. Like maybe Carl Jung is number two, which is also very interesting, right? Very very interesting. But I really like Bob Proctor, so I might be biased about that. But it's interesting because I have books I have books from the Bible at home. I have many books by Carl Jung at home. I have Viktor Frankl's book. I have many books of Earl Nightingale. I have many books by Bob Proctor. I have one book about no, I actually have two books from Stephen Covey. I have one book I think by Wayne Dyer. I have Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I have like three books by Tony Robbins, and I also think I have James Allen's book. Now I might be wrong. I have to check which book he wrote. Yeah, I have one. I think no, I'm not sure about James Allen, but basically I have books in my library at home from all these people. And the person that has spoken the most to me thus far is Bob Proctor. Now, Jesus is 100%, like, it's a totally different discussion, but let's not go there in this video. But it's very interesting. And Carl Jung is also very interesting. I haven't read anything about him. It's like, once again, it's very difficult to understand Carl Jung. And like, I also think it's interesting with Carl Jung because Carl Jung was really interested in Jesus. Which is something I learned recently. Like he talked about like how he thought that Jesus was talking to the subconscious of his, when Jesus was preaching or teaching his apostles. No, I have to check what the correct word is in disciples. Sorry, disciples. About all these things, Carl Jung talks about he thinks that Jesus was talking to the subconscious of the disciples to kind of change, because where does change happen? It happens in the subconscious. It doesn't happen in your conscious. So basically, I can make a movie that touches touches people's subconscious, which is basically they feel stuff. Like they watch a movie, they feel stuff, which becomes like an experience, which then can change your paradigm basically, which is their actions to then get the results. And Bob Proctor talks about like to know where your paradigm is, check how much you're making each month. That's basically his like focus on paradigm. And I also think Earl Nightingale. I mean, Bob Proctor was studied Earl Nightingale, but Earl Nightingale was also kind of like it's not as easy to understand as Bob Proctor, right? And Viktor Frankl is also like he talks about he has a why. Yeah, he mentioned in his book Man's Search for Meaning, he has a why can bear almost anyhow. So there's like, I think that two people are very interesting, it's like Carl Jung and Jesus Christ, but I think that I'm going to talk about Bob Proctor in this video because that has been the person has been for me the easiest to understand this concept, and I've read like 10 books by Bob Proctor, I think. Maybe 10, maybe 6 books, and I read his Change Your Paradigm, Change Your Life book over 10 times. So I've studied this guy a lot, and because I think he's kind of the best at making it simple. Like, how can I understand such a difficult topic, right? And to kind of to go back to what I was talking to before, which was basically just, I think that you entering flow state is the biggest problem of you not entering flow state is your fears and your worries. And this is basically exactly what Bob Proctor talks about in his book. Bob Proctor talks about that if you like want something, so he actually helped companies at a moment in his life. So there was an insurance company that Bob Proctor was asked to help them, and he basically what he did was like, I'm only going to ask you to change 2 habits. And the first habit was it might have been one habit. I think that what we basically said, I just want you to be in front of a prospect and ask them to buy before 9 a.m. or something. It was one very simple like habit he wanted them to implement. And this habit basically made this company go from like 10x or 100x, I don't remember, but this company became making so much more money because of this simple habit. Now, what have I told you about in this video? If you enter flow state in the most highest leverage work, you'll become rich. What was the thing that they did? Sales call, basically. Now, this is a long time ago, so sales call wasn't online. Sales call was in real life. You met someone, and then you asked them, hey, do you want to buy insurance for $100,000? Maybe. So that was the only habit that Bob Proctor changed. But that simple habit, it becomes a habit when you do this every day for a long period of time. How long? People say it's different, and I agree. It's very difficult to say how long. It's so different between humans and what has happened before in your life and so forth. I think that honestly, the best person that talks about habits is, I think, actually Warren Buffett. He talks about if you do something for 2 years, I think that's when you do it for life. It's very, very difficult to stop doing something if you have done something for more than 2 years every day, basically. Which is like why addictions is so difficult to stop. And I think that is a real habit. Like, right, you're doing something for 2 years, and not like 30 days or 60 days. I think that it's not realistic for you to read. Like, if you're talking serious transformation, and let me tell you what I mean by this. What do I mean by transformation? What is the biggest challenge into you getting into flow state? It's fears, right? It's fears in your head. Like, oh, what if this happens, that happens, this happens. And how I think about this is when I think about Sam Ovens. Sam Ovens talks about imaginary friends, and he talks about like when you're little. When I was little, I had imaginary friends. Blaisd and Loif were they called, and then one day I stopped thinking about them, and I remember my father told me that you said that your friends were dead. And that is the idea I have of fears. So one day the fears just go quiet. That's when you reach your new paradigm, basically. So let's stick with the word fear, because once again, one of the most biggest quotes by Carl Jung is, where your fear is, there is your task. Or Joseph Campbell, I think, said, where the treasure, the cave that holds the treasure that you seek is guarded by fear. No, the fear, no. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. That's the quote, sorry. But I think Carl Jung is like the best person about this, which is, once again, he was the best person after Jesus about paradigm personal paradigm change. And I know that Earl Nightingale and also Bob Proctor has spoken so much about, um, has quoted the Bible and the New Testament. And another thing I want to tell you about, okay, Jesus is. So I'm actually gonna search right now. What was the most repeated sentence by Jesus Christ? Yes, do not be afraid. That is the most repeated phrase by Jesus. Now, now we're getting into like a serious, interesting territory, because where have we come? Where have we gone through in this conversation? Like, I'm actually scaring myself a little bit with how aware I've become these years about all this, because basically, um, it's so crazy. I started with, if you want to get rich, that's kind of the first, like where we started this road. You want to get rich. The one thing that is going to determine that is how much you enter into flow state, and also if you do the most leveraged work. Those two things combined. And in this case, it's like you want to get rich, you have to get into flow state, and you have to do a lot of outreach, right? And then what is the biggest thing, the biggest dragon you're going to have to battle in the cave, basically? This is what Charlie Morgan teaches. This is what Sam Ovens teaches. It's fear. And fear is thoughts, right? Once again, and this happened today. Like, I have worked for 40 minutes trying to get into flow state, and my time goes so by fast, so by. Clock is almost 1 p.m. and I get fearful thoughts in my head. And I know that when I get fearful thoughts in my head, I usually escape. I check my phone, I start watching a YouTube video, I start watching Netflix, I start playing video games, I escape some boots to not feel this fear, right? I'm afraid of this, so I don't want to feel it. And I stop doing that. I stop being in flow state, basically. So fear is just like, you stop being in flow state and you start doing something else. It doesn't even matter what it is you do. You stop being in flow state. That's what matters. You stop being in flow state because of fear. And to dive further into this, like, so that now we're at fear, right? And fear, I start talking about paradigm change. Because why do you feel fear, right? Why? Because it's very like, you have to understand why you feel fear. Because, like, I can tell you this, everything that has happened to me, first of all, nothing has happened in my life that has like been, like, looking back in my life, nothing that has happened in my life that I can think of now that has been like, I cannot handle this, because that is what fear is. Fear is I cannot handle this, that I'm afraid that will happen. That used to make it, and there's a good book about this, which is called "Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway." So basically, fear is just like, on the deepest level, I'm afraid I can't handle it, which is basically, honestly, it's death. And it's two types of death, right? It's your physical death and your death of your character or your identity. This is what Jesus talks about when you have to die in order to be reborn again. That you have. So if I do something that I'm afraid of, so let's say I start asking out girls, for example. So I was at this restaurant yesterday, and this waitress who were like, we're not really flirting, just little small flirting. I was like, maybe I should ask this girl out, and I didn't because of fear. And if I would have done that, that would have been very like something I don't usually do. So it would have been a real transformation. I would have walked out of that, even if the worst case would be I get rejected, right? And I would leave that restaurant and I would be a very much more braver man. And I would be like, oh, I can't do that. I can handle that, because that's what you realize. You do something you're afraid of, and you realize I can handle that. So like, I ask a girl out, I get a rejection. It really hurts for a while. Even if it hurts for a day, 2 days, a week, then you realize after that week, like, I could handle it. I'm alive. So you kind of prove yourself that, okay, I thought I could not handle this, but you can handle this, right? So that is what fear is. Can I handle this thing happening? So I'm thinking about all these fearful thoughts that I have, and it's kind of extreme in my case. It's about my reputation, basically, and my reputation being ruined, because that is what Charlie Munger has been talking about. Your most valuable assets are your integrity and your reputation, and your integrity meaning you being honest and doing the things that you say you're going to do. So you trust basically, and and reputation is like, well, do people trust you? Once again, trust. So I know that the most valuable commodity I have is trust. Do people trust me or not? So that's why my fears right now are not about like, they're very, very deep. Like my reputation. Will people trust me? Will I be rejected as a person in the group? That's my ultimate fear. That's, I think, what all of our ultimate fears are. Like, will I be um, cast out from the group? And now let's talk about Jesus, the most brave man on earth. He was literally cast out from the group. He was murdered. He was tortured. He was humiliated in front of the place he was living. Like, these are talking the most horrific way of being cast out in the group, left out of the group. We're talking the biggest fear that we have as human beings. There's nothing that is more scary than being cast out of the group, by far. It's even worse than being killed. So the worst fear that we have is public speaking, because we're so afraid of the opinions of others, right? So the top fear, once again, I want to focus on the one thing. The top fear I have is basically, will I be rejected by the group? On the deepest level, because there's so many fears on the surface, but they all come to this same fear: will I be rejected by the group? And the thing that I've been waiting to tell you is that, no, I already told you about it. The thing that Jesus Christ talks the most about is do not fear. Now, this is the best person of all time about personal paradigm change. It's also the most repeated verse in the Bible. I mean, the sentence in the Bible. It's also something that Carl Jung talks about. Where your fear is, there is your task. He's basically saying that the thing that you're afraid of, that is exactly what you have to work on. You should not escape, you should work on it. So basically, the fear is like, you will be rejected by the group. But if you believe Jesus is God, and I believe Jesus is God, then I don't have to be afraid. There's only one thing I should be afraid of, and that is the Father, God. And so basically, once again, the fears that I have are like, I know that Jesus tells me, do not be afraid. So then I do the thing. So that then we come to like the next, the final destination, right? After fears, you do the thing, even though you're afraid. So when I am entering flow state and I'm getting these fearful thoughts, I keep working. I don't let, I feel the fear and I do it anyway, because I'm afraid I will be rejected by the group. But Jesus says, don't be afraid, son. And I say, amen. And I do the work. And that's when I get what I was working towards. And in this case, it was being rich. And then you become rich, and then you're not going to be afraid anymore, because your new paradigm is basically going to be you being rich. So then you're going to probably have fears about something different. And I don't know what that is. That is only you know. So I've basically gone through like the whole road to getting basically, I mean, I'm not even gonna say getting rich and getting anything you want, like a girlfriend, or because it's so much more bigger than that. It's so much more bigger than that, because what is it that you will end up at? That's kind of the question I keep asking myself. Like, I don't know. Is the first answer. Like, I don't know if I keep doing the things that I'm afraid of, right? If I keep being in flow state of like doing something, I don't know where I'm gonna end up. That's the life for me to find out. But I do know that this is exactly what Jesus is talking about. In order for you to like, I don't even know how to put it other than, in order for you to come home to God. Now that's a mic drop, and I don't even know how to continue this video, because I don't think that's that. So I talked about this being a road. Like, we can also talk about like the cave you fear to enter is holds the treasure that you seek. What is the treasure? And it actually talks about the treasure in the Bible. And God is the treasure in the Bible, right? So it's gonna the God is in this cave. Now I think that a very actually something I realized now. No, it's not, and I'm not gonna. There's a scene in Indiana Jones 3 when Indiana Jones enters a cave. That's why I love that scene in the movie, because it's so beautiful how they wrote that movie. It's like he enters a cave, he goes deeper in the cave, and in the deepest part of the cave, he has this. Basically, I think that I don't even know how to say it, but Jesus was in there. No, I don't know. I don't know how to say it, but the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And in the Bible, the treasure is God, right? But then I actually was talking to a friend of mine a few months ago, and he said maybe we are the treasure. So, like, what if Jesus was God? Then he died for something, right? He died for us, the love for us people. So the people is the treasure for God, I think, or maybe, like, who knows, right? This is what my friend said, like, and it was so like we was in a group of 4 people, 2 girls and he and I, and a girl started crying when he said that we are the treasure for God, and God is the treasure for us. So that's why, once again, the cave that you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So when you enter the cave, it's like you are the treasure for God, waiting for you there, and God is the treasure for you. It's kind of like a union. I think that that's gonna be it for this video, guys. I'm gonna eat lunch now, but I basically told you something, like, I think it's so important, and I think that, like, after this video, I'm going to keep being in flow state. I'm gonna work for like 4 more hours, and I'm gonna be in flow state. I'm gonna feel fear, and I'm gonna keep doing outreach, and that's gonna lead me somewhere, you know. And it's not nothing real crazy is gonna happen today, right? It's actually a salary day in Sweden now, and I made actually nice money this month. And like next month, it might be even more money, right? And if I keep doing this, like, it might be even more money. But I already realized that the money is definitely not the treasure. You think it is, right? But it's not. So I already realized that the flow state leverage, basically the action I take when am in flow state, it's not really the treasure I seek, right? Actually, the real treasure is having like deep conversation with people. That's flow state right there. That I think definitely um, will lead me closer to my treasure. And then there's gonna be something else, right? And that's why, like, I can only talk about like being rich now, right? Because how can I talk about something that I am not even there yet to talk about? So thank you so much for watching, guys.